This isn't just a story about deceit. It's about realizing the life I was living wasn't mine, but a stage set by those I loved most. They thought they pushed me into the abyss with nothing. They knew nothing about the $85,000 check or the bloody legacy it was meant to protect. They underestimated me. That was their last mistake. My name is Alara Hayes. I am 35 years old. Until 2 months ago, I believed I had a good life, a life built on solid ground. I live in Cedar Springs, Colorado, one of those picturesque mountain towns that's booming so fast the old-timers can barely recognize it. My house is a small, charming craftsman in the old neighborhood, the kind with original hardwood floors that creak and a deep porch swing. It was my sanctuary. I am a data analyst. It sounds dull, but I worked for the Riverbend Community Fund, a local nonprofit that, on paper, was dedicated to preserving the town's history and helping the community. It felt stable, meaningful. My life was a portrait of stable, meaningful contentment, the charming house, the fulfilling job, and my attentive husband, Mark. Mark is a development consultant. He is the handsome one, the one who knows everyone, who can talk a skeptical zoning board into any variance or charm a hesitant investor. He was always my rock, the steady hand at my back. And then there is my sister, Chloe. She is 3 years younger, the impulsive one, the whirlwind to my quiet spreadsheet. Our relationship has always been complicated, part fierce loyalty, part simmering rivalry, but she is blood. She is my sister. I thought that bond was unbreakable. The past 2 months have been a blur, a fog of grief. My grandmother, Beatrice, passed away. She was the matriarch of our family, a woman forged from granite and barbed wire. She was tough, yes, but she saw things. Everyone else in the family, especially Mark and Chloe, had long dismissed her as paranoid and difficult. She never trusted Cedar Springs' rapid progress, and she certainly never trusted Mark. I loved her, but I, too, had learned to tune out her warnings as the ramblings of an eccentric old woman. Now, I just felt hollow. Mark, however, was a model of supportive efficiency. "You just focus on grieving, Ilara," he said, kissing my temple, his voice a perfect calibration of sorrow and strength. "I'll handle all of Beatrice's paperwork. The last thing you need to worry about is probate court." He seemed to spend hours sorting through her legal files, making calls, and signing papers. He assured me the estate was mostly sentimental items and, unfortunately, a little bit of debt. "It's just trinkets, honey," he said gently, stroking my hair. "Nothing of real value. I've already had it assessed." Chloe started coming over constantly. I thought she was there for me, to sit with me in the shared silence of our loss. But she seemed agitated. She and Mark would huddle in the kitchen, their voices low, heads bent together over his laptop. When I would walk in, they would pull apart, and Chloe would give me a bright, brittle smile. "Oh, Ilara, we were just talking about the legal details. It's all so complicated." She would wave a dismissive hand. "Mark is being such a saint, handling it all. It's just too much for you right now, with everything you're feeling." I wanted to believe it. I wanted to sink into the comfort they were offering, to let them build a cocoon around me. But I could not shake a growing sense of unease. It was the little things, the grit in the oyster. The atmosphere in my perfect little house started to feel suffocating. It was the silences that were the loudest. I would walk into the living room and Mark would snap his laptop shut, the click echoing in the quiet. "Just work, honey," he would say, smiling too quickly. "Dealing with a difficult client." I would catch them looking at each other when they thought I was not paying attention. It was not a look of shared grief or mutual support. It was something else, possessive, triumphant. Once, I came home early from work. The quiet drone of the fund's office was too much, and heard Mark on the phone in his study. His voice was not the warm, reassuring tone I knew. It was hard, cold. "The timeline is accelerating. We move as soon as the last signature clears." He heard the floorboard creak as I stood frozen in the hall. He hung up immediately. When he came out, he was my loving husband again, his face a mask of concern. "Ilara, you're home. Bad day." He pulled me into a hug, but his shirt smelled faintly of Chloe's perfume, that musky, expensive sandalwood I had told her was too strong. I pushed the doubts down. I buried them deep. This was grief. Grief makes you paranoid, I told myself. It makes you see shadows where there is only light. I was becoming my grandmother, seeing conspiracies in every quiet conversation. I trusted Mark. He was my husband. I trusted Chloe. She was my sister. My brain repeated these facts like a mantra, trying to drown out the screaming intuition in my gut. They were helping me. I was the one who was broken, lost in the fog. The illusion shattered on a rainy Tuesday. It was month end, and I was paying our bills online. Mark always handled the finances. He was the consultant, after all, but I liked to keep an eye on things. I was scrolling through our joint checking account statement, a list of mundane transactions: mortgage, groceries, the electric bill, and then I saw it, a payment, a big one, thousands of dollars. It was a recurring transfer, coded as lease payment, CPG. The recipient was a corporate entity I did not recognize. My fingers felt cold on the keyboard. This was my domain. Data. I cross-referenced the entity's name. It was a property management group for The Cypress, one of those new, sterile high-rises downtown, the kind of place with a rooftop pool and a concierge, the kind Mark and I always said was soulless. I dug deeper, my analyst brain taking over, running on pure, cold adrenaline. I pulled up the PDF of the full bank statement, looking for the check image. It was not a check. It was an automated clearinghouse transfer, but the memo line, which I had missed on the summary screen, had the details. Unit 1208. Leaseholder Chloe T. Hayes. Chloe. My sister. In a luxury apartment I did not know about, paid for from my joint account. The air left my lungs. The sentimental items and little bit of debt. The complicated legal details. The hushed kitchen conversations. The snapped-shut laptop. The scent of her perfume. It all clicked into place, not as paranoia, but as a clear, terrifying picture. A picture of the perfect, systematic rot that had been growing right under my feet. My breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. I closed the laptop. The house was silent. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a mocking countdown. I picked up my phone, my fingers, numb and clumsy, dialed Mark. He answered on the third ring, his voice warm, practiced. "Hey, honey, still at the office?" "Yes," I said. My own voice sounded strange, thin and high. "It's the end of quarter reports. Arthur wants them revised. I'm going to be very late. Don't wait up." "Oh, Ilara, you work too hard," he said, the fake sympathy a knife in my ear. "Are you sure I can bring you dinner?" "No, don't. I'll just grab something. I love you." The words tasted like ash. "Love you too. See you in the morning." He hung up. I grabbed my keys and my purse. I did not take a coat. The rain was lashing against the windows of my car as I pulled out of the driveway, the wipers beating a frantic rhythm against the glass. The drive to downtown Cedar Springs was a blur of smeared neon and red taillights. The Cypress was a new building, a monolith of glass and steel that had ripped a hole in the old skyline. It represented everything my grandmother Beatrice had hated. Soulless, she'd called it. A glass tomb for people with no roots. I pulled into the visitor's garage. The air was damp and smelled of curing concrete. I drove down one level, then another, and there it was. His dark blue BMW, parked arrogantly in a visitor's spot near the elevator bay. A sick, metallic taste flooded my mouth. It was real. The data had not lied. I walked to the elevator lobby. The polished stone walls reflected a ghost I did not recognize. My hair was plastered to my face, my eyes wide and dark. The keypad glowed an antiseptic green. Access code. I thought of Chloe. Impulsive, vain, and utterly predictable. I lifted a trembling finger and punched in her birthday. 0, 8, 1, 4. The light on the panel flashed green, and with a soft electronic thud, the lock disengaged. My heart was a fist pounding against my ribs. The elevator ride was silent, a smooth, sterile ascent. The air inside smelled of faint, chemical lemon. 12th floor. The doors opened onto a hallway carpeted in a thick, sound-dampening gray. Unit 1208 was at the end of the hall. I stopped 10 feet from the door. I could hear them. I heard her laugh that high, shrieking sound she made when she was tipsy. And beneath it, I heard Mark's deeper rumble, the sound I had mistaken for comfort, for love, for home. My hand went to my keychain, to the single stray key Mark had given me over a year ago. "This is for Chloe's new place," he had said, dropping it into my palm. "You know her. She'd lose her own head if it wasn't attached. Just hang on to this, babe, in case of emergencies. A backup. A backup. An emergency." My hand was perfectly steady as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a well-oiled, silent snick. I pushed the heavy door open. The apartment was a shrine to bad modern taste. Gray couches, chrome fixtures, and a wall of glass overlooking the rain-swept city. The lights were dim, but the door to the master bedroom was open. A warm, yellow light spilled out, along with the scent of champagne and sandalwood. I walked across the living room, my wet shoes leaving dark prints on the pale hardwood floor. I did not try to be quiet. They did not notice. I reached the bedroom doorway and stopped. They were in the bed, tangled in expensive, high-thread count white sheets. A half-empty bottle of Veuve Clicquot was melting in a silver ice bucket on the nightstand. They were not just sleeping. They were celebrating. I must have made a sound, a gasp, or a sob. Mark looked up first. His face was flushed. When he saw me, he did not flinch. He did not look ashamed or guilty. He looked annoyed. He let out an exasperated sigh, as if I were a telemarketer interrupting his dinner. Chloe pulled the sheet up over her bare chest, her blonde hair a tangled mess on the pillows. She just glared at me. "Ilara," Mark said. His voice was flat. He sat up, the sheet pooling at his waist, making no move to cover himself. "Why?" The word was a dry croak. He swung his legs out of the bed. He was completely naked, his body pale and muscled in the lamplight. He did not look at me. He walked over to a leather briefcase slung over a chair in the corner and pulled on a pair of gray boxer briefs. He was all business. "It's over, Ilara," he said, his back to me. "It has been for a long time. It's time for you to face reality." "Reality?" My voice was shaking now. "This is reality." Chloe stood up, wrapping a thick white towel around her body. She sauntered past me, out of the bedroom, and returned with the champagne bottle, taking a long drink directly from it. "God, you really are just so naive," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Her eyes were cold, assessing. "Did you actually think a man like that?" She gestured at Mark with the bottle. "Wanted your boring little life, your gardening club, and your sad little nonprofit job? It was pathetic." "He's my husband," I whispered. "He's my partner," she corrected. Mark finally turned to face me. His face was a cold, handsome mask. "She's right. This was always a business arrangement. You just complicated it." He walked back to his briefcase and pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. He held them out to me. I did not take them. He let them drop to the floor. "That," he said, "is a temporary restraining order. It's already been signed by a judge." I bent down and picked it up. My eyes scanned the words, but my brain could not process them. Ilara Hayes. Mark Reed. And then the allegations, in stark black and white: increasingly erratic behavior, severe mental instability, paranoid delusions following the death of her grandmother. My head snapped up. "What is this?" This is insane. It's proactive, Mark said. I'm protecting myself and my assets. The order specifically forbids you from entering our home. He corrected himself. My home? You can't. I started. You can't just throw me out of my own house. I can. And I have. His voice was utterly devoid of emotion. There is a police officer waiting for you there right now. He will escort you inside to retrieve toiletries and 2 days' worth of clothing. After that, you are not to come within 500 feet of me or the property. If you do, you will be arrested. I looked from his cold, stranger's face to my sister. Chloe was still sipping her champagne, watching me with a look of detached curiosity, as if I were a mildly interesting bug squirming under a microscope. I think you should go now, Mark said. He walked to the apartment's front door and held it open, the hallway light spilling in. I was frozen. My body was ice. The rain on the windows, the smell of sex and champagne, the legal document in my hand. It was a nightmare. Go, Elara, he repeated, his voice hardening. I walked past him. I did not look at him. I did not look at my sister. I walked out into the gray hallway, my dark, wet footprints following me. The door clicked shut behind me. The sound was final. It was the sound of my life, my home, and my entire past being locked away, and I was on the wrong side of the door. I do not remember driving away from the Cypress. I do not remember the humiliating, scripted encounter at my own home, the silent police officer standing on my porch swing as I frantically stuffed underwear and 2 pairs of jeans into a duffel bag, his eyes averted. I must have spent the night in my car in some suburban cul-de-sac because I woke up with a painful crick in my neck and the gray, watery light of dawn filtering through the fogged-up windows. My first coherent thought was money. I needed a lawyer. I needed a hotel room. I needed to exist. I drove to our local branch of the bank, the one where the tellers knew my name. I walked in at 9:01, just as the doors opened. The familiar scent of industrial carpet and recycled air did nothing to calm the hornet's nest in my stomach. I sat down at the desk of a personal banker, a kind-faced woman named Maria. "Hi, Elara," she said, her smile practiced. "Well, what can we do for you today?" "I need to transfer all the funds from my personal savings account into a new, individual checking account," I said, my voice hoarse. "And I need to see the balance on my joint account with my husband." Her fingers tapped on the keyboard. Her smile wavered. Just for a second. "Well, let's look at the joint account first." She turned the screen toward me. "As you can see, the balance on that account is currently 0. I stared at the number. 0. It had held over $20,000 just last week. When was it emptied? "There was a single wire transfer for the full amount, made yesterday afternoon," she said, her voice dropping to a professional, unhelpful monotone. He did that," I whispered. "Okay, fine. Just my savings. I need my savings." More typing. Maria's face was now a mask of polite regret. "Mrs. Hayes, your personal savings account. It was closed." "Closed? What do you mean? Closed. I didn't close it." "It was closed 3 days ago," she said, refusing to meet my eyes. "The funds were transferred to the joint account. And then, well, they were part of the wire transfer yesterday." "I didn't authorize that. I didn't sign anything." "We have the authorization form on file," she said, her voice barely audible. "It has your signature, authorizing your husband to take control of the account." "It's a forgery," I said, my voice rising. "That's not my signature. Can't you see?" "Ma'am," she said, her tone shifting from polite to firm. "Our legal department validated the signature. As far as the bank is concerned, it was a legitimate transaction. There is nothing I can do." I left the bank. I was numb. I had nothing. No. I had my job. I could get a paycheck advance. I could talk to my boss, Arthur Vance. He'd always been so supportive. I drove to the Riverbend Community Fund. I parked in my usual spot, walked up the familiar brick path. I held my security card to the reader on the glass door. Nothing. I tried again. A short, sharp beep, beep, beep of denial. The light flashed red. The receptionist, a young woman named Jenny, saw me through the glass. Her face flushed with pity, and she buzzed me in manually, avoiding my gaze as I walked in. "Hi, Alara. Mr. Vance wants to see you. Right away." The air in the office was thick with a silence I had never noticed before. People who usually smiled and waved were suddenly fascinated by their computer screens as I walked past. I knocked on Arthur Vance's open door. He was a tall, silver-haired man who favored expensive suits and spoke in a calming, measured tone. Today, he just looked impatient. "Ah, Ilara, close the door." I sat. He did not ask about my grandmother. He did not ask if I was okay. He slid a thick blue folder across his polished mahogany desk. "Ilara," he began, steepling his fingers. "As you know, the fund is always evolving. We've been conducting a thorough review of our operational efficiencies. Unfortunately, this means we are having to make some difficult decisions." The corporate jargon was a smokescreen, and I knew, instinctively, what was next. "We are undergoing a significant restructuring," he continued, "and your position, it has been eliminated." My position. I was the only senior data analyst. I built their entire system. "Arthur, that doesn't make any sense. We're in the middle of the annual donation drive analysis." "The decision is final," he said. His eyes were like cold, gray stones. "We are, however, prepared to offer you a generous severance package. 6 weeks' pay, contingent, of course, on your signature." I opened the folder. My eyes scanned the legal boilerplate until they landed on one section, non-competition. It was not a standard clause. It was a cage. It forbade me from working in any nonprofit organization, data analysis firm, or community development fund, not just in Cedar Springs, but within the entire state of Colorado. For 2 years. I looked up from the paper, my blood running cold. This is insane. This would make it impossible for me to get a job. Anywhere. He shrugged, a small, elegant movement of his shoulders. "That is the offer." "You know Mark," I said. It was not a question. It was a statement. The pieces were clicking together with terrifying speed. The endless consulting meetings Mark had with the fund, the way Arthur always approved Mark's development proposals. Arthur Vance's face did not change. "Your personal life is of no concern to the fund. I suggest you sign the agreement. Ilara, it's the best offer you are going to get." I stood up, leaving the folder on his desk. "I'm not signing it." He just nodded, as if he expected this. "As you wish." "In that case, your employment is terminated, effective immediately. Please leave your keys and ID with reception." I was sitting in my car, parked across the street from my old office. I was shaking. I was locked out of my bank, fired from my job, and barred from my home. I pulled out my phone and Googled Best Divorce Attorneys Cedar Springs. I dialed the first one on the list. The paralegal who answered was efficient. "And what are the grounds for the dissolution?" "Ms. Hayes." "Adultery," I said, the word feeling foreign. "And fraud. He's locked me out of my accounts. He's—" One moment. I was put on hold, forced to listen to a bland classical tune. Then, a new voice, sharp and professional. "Ms. Hayes, this is Mr. Kincaid. I've just pulled the file. I'm afraid I cannot represent you." "Why not? Is it a conflict of interest?" "In a manner of speaking," the lawyer said dryly. "Mr. Reed, your husband, already has representation. In fact, he filed for dissolution of marriage last week." The phone felt slippery in my hand. "Last week." "Correct. And he filed for an emergency motion to freeze all assets, pending a financial review. The motion was granted." "On what grounds?" I yelled into the phone. "He's the one who—" "According to the signed declaration from Mr. Reed," the lawyer said, his voice flat as he read from a screen. He alleges you have developed a severe and debilitating gambling problem since your grandmother's death, that you have been liquidating assets irrationally, and that he is acting to protect the marital estate from your erratic behavior. The judge granted the freeze. A gambling problem. A lie so specific, so grotesque. It was designed to destroy my credibility completely. I hung up. I sat in my car for an hour, maybe 2. The sun started to set. I tried to think. Friends. I had to call my friends. I called Sarah, my best friend since college. Voicemail. I called Ben and Amy, the couple we had dinner with every Friday. Voicemail. I called 4, 5, 6 other people. Our people. My people. No one answered. Not a single person. My support network. My life. My entire world. Mark and Chloe had not just betrayed me, they had systematically amputated me from my own life. It had been less than 48 hours. I had no husband, I had no sister, I had no home, I had no job, I had no money. I looked in my wallet. I had a driver's license that listed an address I could not go to, a useless corporate ID card, and about $200 in cash from an ATM withdrawal I'd made before the world ended. I had my car. That was it. I had been erased. The first night was the worst. I ended up in the 24-hour Walmart parking lot on the edge of town, parked between a massive RV and a panel van. I reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go, but sleep was impossible. Every flicker of headlights, every voice in the parking lot made me jump. I was cold, a deep, damp cold that settled into my bones. My duffel bag was a pathetic lump on the passenger seat, a reminder of the 15 years of my life I'd left behind in that house. I spent 3 days in that car, 3 days existing in a state of suspended humiliation. I used the Walmart bathroom to wash my face and brush my teeth, my eyes stinging from the fluorescent lights and the acrid smell of blue disinfectant. I watched other women walk in, their carts full, their lives intact. I would avert my gaze, feeling like a ghost, a non-person. I bought coffee from the gas station, using quarters I scrounged from the bottom of my purse. I ate protein bars that tasted like chalk. With every passing hour, the fog of shock began to clear, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. This was not an impulsive act of passion. This was a systematic execution. Mark's help with Beatrice's estate, it was never help. It was a reconnaissance mission. He had been looking for assets. He'd been handling all the paperwork, isolating me from the legal process, all to gain control. The forged signature, the fake gambling accusation, the immediate restraining order, it was a pre-planned, coordinated attack. Chloe's sudden, constant presence, her complicated legal questions, she was his accomplice, distracting me with fake sisterly concern while he dismantled my life. They had been planning this for months, maybe longer. They had waited until my grandmother was gone, until I was at my most vulnerable, suffocated by grief. They had used my trust and my sorrow as weapons against me. The fake job at the Riverbend Fund, the isolation from my friends, it all pointed to something bigger, darker, and more intricate than just an affair. They had not just left me, they had tried to erase me. On the 3rd night, I was huddled under my emergency car blanket, my stomach aching from hunger, trying to ignore the security guard making his rounds. I was down to my last $60. I was thinking about driving to a shelter, and the shame of that thought was so profound it made me nauseous. Then I thought of Beatrice. I thought of her stern face, her constant warnings. He's not what he seems. Alara, his eyes are too smooth. And I remembered. The storage unit. It was a tiny 5 by 10 foot cinder block room at U Store It, way out on the old highway. Beatrice had kept it for decades. After she died, Mark had asked what was in it. Just old junk, I'd told him. Furniture from her first apartment, moth-eaten clothes. Nothing of value. He'd been so dismissive. I'll have a junk hauler clear it out next week. Honey, don't you worry about it. But he had not gotten around to it. He was too busy liquidating my savings and sleeping with my sister. A spark, tiny and fierce, ignited in my chest. I started the car. The storage facility office was a small, dusty trailer. A sleepy-eyed man sat behind a metal desk, a tiny television buzzing in the corner. "I'm here for Unit B12, I said. "Beatrice Hayes." He typed slowly, one finger at a time. "That account is past due," he grunted. 2 months. We were scheduled to auction it off on the 1st. "I'll pay it," I said, my voice trembling. "In cash. Right now." The fee was $140. It was almost everything I had left. I pushed the bills across the counter. He counted them, then handed me a rusted-looking key and a receipt. The unit was at the back of the facility. The metal roll-up door shrieked in protest as I heaved it open, the sound echoing in the pre-dawn quiet. A wave of cold, musty air hit me. It smelled of mildew, cedar, and old paper. It was exactly as I remembered: a lumpy floral print sofa, a standing lamp with a cracked shade, stacked boxes of clothes that were already disintegrating. It was a tomb of worthless memories. Mark was right. It was junk. My hope collapsed. I was standing in a concrete box, having just spent my last dollars on literal trash. I sank onto the arm of the musty sofa, ready to cry. And then I saw it. Tucked in the back corner, behind a stack of National Geographics, was a small gray metal file box, the kind with a cheap lock on the front. It was not locked. I pulled it out, my heart starting to pound again. I set it on the floor and opened the lid. The hinges creaked. The first layer was exactly what I expected. Old tax returns from the 1980s, property deeds for houses sold decades ago, a warranty for a refrigerator that was probably in a landfill. My fingers dug through the brittle, yellowed manila folders. Underneath it all, there was a book. It was not a file. It was an old, cloth-bound library book from the Cedar Springs Public Library. The title on the spine was worn away. It felt heavy in my hands. I opened the cover. The inside had been hollowed out. Tucked neatly into the carved-out pages was a thick, cream-colored bank envelope. My fingers were shaking so badly I could barely pull it free. Inside, there were 2 items. The first was a cashier's check. It was pristine. It was dated 1 week before Beatrice died. It was made out to Alara Hayes. The amount was $85,000. I think I stopped breathing. It was a fortune. It was a lifeline. It was a weapon. My eyes fell on the second item in the envelope. It was a small, single piece of paper, folded in half. It was from one of her old, floral print notepads. Her handwriting, sharp and angry, filled the page. I walked out of the storage facility into the cold, gray light of 4 a.m. The check was in my coat pocket, a stiff, rectangular weight against my ribs. The note was clenched in my left hand. The paper crinkled from the pressure of my grip. I got into my car, the interior still smelling of stale fear, and drove. I did not have a destination. I just drove until I saw the neon sign of a 24-hour diner, the Nighthawk, glowing like a lonely beacon in the industrial part of town. I parked, walked in, and slid into a cracked vinyl booth in the back corner. A waitress with tired eyes and a name tag that read, "Flo," poured me a cup of coffee without asking. It tasted burnt, metallic. My hands were shaking so violently that the cup rattled in the saucer. I was still clutching the note. I placed it on the table, next to the small puddle of water from a leak in the ceiling, and smoothed it flat. The floral border was so jarringly cheerful. Beatrice's handwriting was not. It was sharp, precise, and furious. Every letter a spike. "Ilara," it began. "Do not trust a single person, especially that husband of yours. He is not just a cheater. He is a snake. I told you I saw it in his eyes. You did not listen." A cold shudder ran through me. This was not a guess. This was a statement of fact, written before I had any idea. Your sister is weak and she is greedy. That is a dangerous combination. She has always been jealous of what you have, and she is too stupid to see when she is being used. Mark is using her, and she is letting him. I closed my eyes, the image of them in that high-rise bed, the champagne, Chloe's sneer. It was not an affair, it was an alliance. I read the next line, and the coffee cup slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. Your father did not abandon you. He was murdered. Flo, the waitress, glanced over, sighed, and came toward me with a rag. I barely noticed her. I just stared at the words. Murdered. My entire childhood was built on a different story. The official story. My father, David Hayes, a respected local journalist, had simply walked out when I was 10. He'd run off with another woman, a younger woman. That was what my mother told everyone. That was what I believed. We were the abandoned family, the objects of pity. I had spent 25 years hating him for his selfishness and missing him with an ache that never went away. You okay, honey? Flo asked, wiping up the coffee. I'm fine, I whispered, my eyes glued to the note. Just tired. She looked at me, a long, appraising look, and left the check on the table. My hands were shaking again. I kept reading. His disappearance was a lie. He was getting too close. He found out what they were doing, and they silenced him. And that job you're so proud of at that fund, that was not an accident. Alara, they put you there. They handed you that job. They have been watching you, watching me through you, for years. The Riverbend Community Fund, Arthur Vance, my eliminated position, the non-compete clause. It was not a severance, it was a gag order, it was a leash, and I had been wearing it for 3 years. The paranoia I'd dismissed in my grandmother was not paranoia at all. It was surveillance. She had been seeing the watchers that I, in my naive trust, had been blind to. This $85,000 is go-away cash. It's everything I could liquidate without them noticing. I was saving it for you, for when the time came. Use it to disappear. Run, Alara, and never look back. Or use it to fight. The note ended with a sentence that made no sense. The real inheritance is not this money. The real inheritance is the proof. Your father's proof. He put it all in the wall, where he knew I would find it. He said to tell me, your mother's music box. I stared at the last 5 words. My head was spinning. Murdered. Watched. Proof. Your mother's music box. I remembered the music box. It was a delicate, stupid porcelain thing that played a tinny version of Für Elise. My mother had kept it on her dresser. It was the last gift my father ever gave her. She had hated it. After he left, she had shut it in a drawer and never looked at it again. But that could not be it. Beatrice's note was too precise for that. He put it in the wall. I thought back, dredging up memories, trying to hear my father's voice, my mother's. And then it hit me, a memory, so sharp and clear it was like a photograph. My mother, years ago, crying after a bad date, drunk on cheap wine. He never understood, she'd slurred, that all I ever wanted was my own home back, the house on Sycamore. That was my real music box. That was where all the memories were. The house on Sycamore Street, my mother's childhood home, a derelict, rotting Victorian in the heart of the old town. A house that had been in probate for decades, caught in some legal limbo. A house I knew very, very well, because it was on my old list at the Riverbend Community Fund. It was part of the Old Town Preservation Project. Arthur Vance had been obsessed with it. He wanted the fund to acquire it, claiming it was a blight, that the fund would graciously take it off the city's hands for pennies on the dollar to restore it. I had run the data on that property a dozen times. It was worthless on paper, but geographically, It was the key to the entire downtown redevelopment. My father's proof. In the wall. Your mother's music box. It was not a sentimental phrase. It was a location. It was a set of coordinates. My grandmother had not just given me money to run. She had given me a map. She had given me a target. The $85,000 was not go-away cash. It was a war chest. I stopped trembling. I picked up the check Flo had left, walked to the register, and paid for the coffee I had spilled. I left her a $20 tip. I walked out of the diner, the sun just beginning to cut a thin, bloody line across the horizon. I was not a victim anymore. I was my grandmother's granddaughter, and my father's daughter. I could not deposit the check in Cedar Springs. Every bank now had a problem gambler flag attached to the name Alara Hayes. But Alara Hayes was my married name. I drove 50 miles south to Colorado Springs, to a large, impersonal branch of a national bank where I had no history. I walked in, my duffel bag over my shoulder, and opened a new business account using my maiden name, Alara Vance. I used my out-of-date driver's license, the one I'd kept for sentimental reasons. I deposited the $85,000 cashier's check. The teller did not blink. The funds, she said, would be available in 24 hours. I had just enough cash left for the next phase. I went to a big box store and bought a pair of black jeans, 2 black sweatshirts, a baseball cap, and a powerful flashlight. I went to a mobile phone store in a strip mall and bought a prepaid, untraceable burner phone. I paid cash for all of it. My last stop was a salon with a flickering neon sign that said, "Cuts." I sat in a chair that smelled of bleach and old cigarettes. "What'll it be?" Han, the stylist, asked, snapping her gum. "Dark," I said, "as dark as you can make it," and cut it short. 2 hours later, a stranger looked back at me from the mirror. My familiar, warm brown hair was gone, replaced by a harsh, almost black bob that framed a pale, gaunt face. I looked harder. I looked like my grandmother. I paid in cash and walked out, pulling the baseball cap low over my eyes. I waited until 2 in the morning. The streets of Cedar Springs were dead. I parked my car 3 blocks away from Sycamore Street, in the shadow of a closed-down laundromat. I walked through the sleeping neighborhood, my new sneakers silent on the cracked pavement. The house on Sycamore Street was a skeleton. It was a 2-story Victorian, but the paint had peeled off in long, leprous strips. The porch was collapsing, and the windows were boarded up with plywood, stamped with the red condemned notice from the city. I did not go to the front door. I slipped around the side, my flashlight beam cutting a small, nervous circle on the overgrown weeds. I knew this house. As kids, Chloe and I had dared each other to go in. I knew the way. Behind a curtain of dead ivy was the cellar entrance, 2 slanted wooden doors, rotted and weak. I shoved my shoulder against one. The wood splintered and gave way with a groan, and I half fell, half slid into the pitch-black basement. The air was a physical thing. It was thick with the smell of damp earth, rat droppings, and a century of decay. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating crumbling stone foundations and the ghostly outlines of rusted tools. I found the wooden stairs and climbed, every step creaking in protest. The first floor was a ruin of collapsed plaster and sodden, peeling wallpaper. I moved through the dark dining room, past the wreckage of a grand staircase, and up the narrow, tilting servants' stairs at the back. My mother's old bedroom was on the 2nd floor, facing the street. The door was gone, ripped from its hinges. The plywood over the windows cast the room in an oppressive, absolute darkness. But I knew the layout by heart. My flashlight beam found the far wall, the one with the bay window. The room was not empty. It had been tossed, but not by vandals. It was the work of someone methodical. The floorboards were pulled up. The fireplace was choked with debris. They had been looking for something. Mark had been looking for something. But they had looked in the wrong places. I went to the bay window. My flashlight beam landed on the wide, wooden sill. And there it was, just as I remembered. a perfect, clean circle in the thick dust, the footprint of the porcelain music box. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt my chest. In the wall, where he put it. Your mother's music box. Not in the floor, not in the chimney, in the wall behind the music box. I tapped the plaster beneath the sill. It sounded solid. I tapped again. Lower. Thud. Thud. Thunk. It was a hollow sound. I pulled my keys from my pocket, the only thing I still had from my old life. I jammed the thick car key into the seam where the sound was hollow and twisted it. The old plaster was soft, almost like wet chalk. It cracked. I clawed at it with my bare fingers, pulling away chunks of lath and plaster until a dark, square hole was revealed. My flashlight beam found it. It was a metal box wrapped in a thick, greasy sheet of oilcloth. It was small, no bigger than a shoebox. I pulled it out. It was heavier than I expected. I did not open it. I could not here. This house felt alive, as if it were watching me. I tucked the box under my sweatshirt, the cold metal shocking my skin, and retreated. I scrambled out of the cellar, pulling the broken door shut behind me. I did not run, but I walked fast, my keys in my fist, checking every shadow. I got back to my car, locked the doors, and threw the box on the passenger seat. I drove to a motel on the interstate, one of those anonymous places with a flickering vacancy sign. I paid cash for one night. The room smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and stale smoke. I bolted the door, slid the chain lock, and wedged a chair under the knob. I sat on the floor, under the single dim lamp, and put the box in front of me. I unwrapped the oilcloth. It was an old tin recipe box, rusted at the edges. I opened the lid. The first thing I saw was a small, cloth-bound ledger. The cover was damp and warped. I opened it. My father's handwriting. Not notes, just lists, dates, names, dollar amounts. Next was an old external hard drive. It was a heavy, silver brick from the early 2000s, with a thick power cable and a connector I had not seen in at least 15 years. Beneath that, at the very bottom, was a stack of photographs held together with a dry, rotted rubber band. I snapped the rubber band. The first few photos were just what I'd expect my father at his desk. My father interviewing a city councilman. Then, a series of pictures from a party. A Christmas party. I recognized Arthur Vance instantly, younger, his hair darker, holding a glass of scotch. He was laughing. Standing next to him was a younger, brighter Chloe, my sister, smiling up at him, looking starstruck. And then I saw him. He was standing on the other side of Arthur. It was Mark. My Mark. But it was not my Mark at all. He was leaner, his hair shorter, wearing a suit I did not recognize. His arm was draped casually, possessively, over Chloe's shoulder. My stomach twisted. So it had been them. Even back then. I was wrong. I looked closer. His arm was not over Chloe. It was over Arthur Vance's shoulder. They were standing together, equals, partners. Chloe was just there, on the edge of the frame, looking in. I turned the photo over. The back was stamped with the date from the photo lab. December 10th, 2 years before I met Mark. 2 years before he accidentally bumped into me at the Riverbend Fund's annual charity gala, spilling his drink on me, apologizing with that devastating, charming smile. A smile that I now realized was pure, calculated artifice. It was not a chance meeting. It was not a whirlwind romance. It was an infiltration. My job, my life, my love. It was all a setup. I was not a wife. I was an assignment. I left the motel on the interstate. I was too exposed. I used my new clean cash to rent a room by the week at a place called the Larkspur Arms. It was a grim, concrete block building that smelled of curry and old cigarettes. The key was a physical key, not a card. The lock was flimsy. I did not care. It was anonymous, and I paid in cash, using a name I made up on the spot. My second purchase was a laptop. I went to a pawn shop downtown and bought a 5-year-old beat-up ThinkPad for $300, again in cash. It was slow, but it was clean, and it had a USB port. The hard drive from the tin box was another problem. It was an IDE drive, a relic from a different technological era. I spent half a day walking to a sketchy, hole-in-the-wall computer repair shop run by a man who looked like he had not seen sunlight in a decade. "I need to get the data off this," I said, placing the drive on his counter. He grunted. "This is a fossil. You need a universal adapter. $20. I paid him. I did not connect the laptop to the motel's unsecured Wi-Fi. I did not connect it to any network. I worked entirely offline. I plugged the adapter into the wall, attached the heavy silver drive, and connected it to the laptop. The drive spun up with a high, whining sound, a ghost booting up after 25 years. A new drive icon appeared on the desktop. D. Hayes Archive. My father's archive. I clicked it. It was his entire digital life, frozen in time. And he had been meticulous. He had folders labeled by subject Zoning Board, City Council, Riverbend, and then, the main one, Apex. I opened the Apex folder. It was a labyrinth of spreadsheets, scanned documents, and audio files. My analyst brain took over, the grief and rage receding, replaced by the familiar cold click of pattern recognition. My father, David Hayes, had not been investigating a simple land deal. He had been unraveling a corporate conspiracy that owned our entire town. It started with Apex Development, a shell corporation registered in Delaware. No public-facing partners, no local office, just a mailing address. My father had tracked its wire transfers. It was moving millions of dollars into Cedar Springs, but not into development. It was moving the money into the Riverbend Community Fund. My job, my good, meaningful nonprofit. The fund, my father's notes showed, was a front, a brilliant one. It was a registered 501c3, a charitable organization. Its stated mission was historic preservation. Arthur Vance was its public face, the charming, silver-haired patrician dedicated to saving our town's soul. But my father's spreadsheets showed the truth. The fund would receive a grant from Apex. Days later, the fund would use that exact amount to buy a distressed historic property in the Old Town District. They bought them for pennies on the dollar, citing blight and preservation costs. My own mother's house on Sycamore was on that list, the keystone of the entire block. The preservation was a lie. Tucked in a subfolder, I found the real plan, a draft of a citywide rezoning ordinance. It was a proposal to abolish the Old Town Historic District entirely, citing unsafe structures and the need for urban renewal. It rezoned the entire swath of land for high-density commercial and luxury residential use. It was a blueprint for a billion-dollar glass and steel neighborhood. My father had found the source of the draft. It was not from a city planner. It was from the private email of a man named Councilman Price, one of the men Arthur Vance was always seen with at charity dinners. But the bribery was not the worst of it. My father had a folder labeled Displaced. It contained audio files, interviews. I plugged in my cheap headphones. I heard the voice of an old man, his voice shaking. "They offered me $50,000 for my house. My grandfather built that house. I said no. A week later, my shop burned down. The fire marshal said it was faulty wiring. I'd just had it rewired." Another voice. A woman. "They told me I could take the check. Or my son, the one who just got that new job at the city." "Well, they said it would be a shame if his provisional employment didn't work out." They were not just buying properties. They were making people sell. They were using threats, arson, and blackmail. And for those who still refused, my father's last document was a text file. It was half-finished. It was just a name, Joseph Rafferty, owner 412 Chestnut, and a single sentence. Rafferty refused last offer, told Vance to go to hell. His car was found at the bottom of the canyon. Police say it was an accident. It was not an accident. They are killing people. They know I'm next. He had been murdered, silenced, Just as Beatrice's note said. I sat back, the motel room's single lamp casting a sickly yellow light. My father had uncovered the truth, and it had cost him his life, and my grandmother Beatrice had known. She had picked up where he left off. I opened the last item from the tin box, the cloth-bound ledger. It was not my father's. The handwriting was Beatrice's. It was not a record of the conspiracy. It was a record of Mark. The first entry was dated almost 5 years ago, just weeks after I had started at the fund. Alara introduced me to her new man, Mark Reed. He's a consultant. He's too smooth. He works for them. He works for Vance. My blood went ice cold. She had known from day one. I turned the page. It was a list of payments, dates, and amounts. April 4th, M. Reed, 5,000. Info on Apex Timeline, June 19th. M. Reed, 10,000. Confirmed Vance is the cleaner. Confirmed he's looking for David's package. My God, she had been paying him. Beatrice had been playing a double game. She knew Mark was planted in our family, knew he was their spy. So she had turned him. She had used his own greed against him. He was a double agent, feeding information to Apex and Arthur Vance, while also selling them out to an old woman for cash. Now I understood. Mark's entire mission, his entire marriage, was to find my father's evidence. Arthur Vance and the Apex predators knew my father had something. They just did not know what or where. They had killed him, but they had not found his proof. So they had sent Mark, the charming infiltrator, to get close to me and through me to Beatrice. He was supposed to charm, marry, and manipulate his way to that box. For years, he had failed. Beatrice was too smart for him. And then, she died. Mark must have been overjoyed. He must have thought his mission was finally over. He must have assumed that whatever proof Beatrice had was either destroyed or buried with her. He was finally free. So he moved to his own Phase 2, his personal exit plan, the one he and Chloe had clearly been nursing for years. With the primary mission finding the evidence a failure, he would pivot to the secondary one-asset seizure. He would destroy me, his cover, his wife, with the fake restraining order and the gambling lie. He would use his legal access to drain our accounts. He would seize the house, which he and Arthur both coveted, as the last remaining asset in the family. He had no idea that Beatrice had left me $85,000. He had no idea that her real will was a note in a storage locker. And he had no idea that the one thing he had been searching for all these years, my father's entire case, was now sitting on a stained motel bedspread, whining softly as its hard drive spun. I was not a person to them. I was an obstacle, and now, a problem to be discarded. They thought I was the naive, fragile wife, the boring woman who loved gardening and spreadsheets. They had built their entire plan on the assumption of my weakness. They thought I was weak and stupid. They thought I was broken by grief. They thought $85,000 was money for me to run and hide, to disappear into a new, sad life. They were wrong. It was a war fund, and I was not grieving anymore. I was calculating. I withdrew $20,000 in cash from my new account. I took a bus to Denver, leaving my car hidden in the long-term parking at the Cedar Springs bus station. I walked into the lobby of a downtown Denver high-rise, a building of reflective glass and polished granite. I did not go to a divorce lawyer. I went to the office of Marcus Thorne, Investigations. The nameplate on his door was simple, discreet. The reviews I'd found online were anything but. He was a former FBI agent who specialized in high-stakes corporate fraud and financial crimes. He was, by all accounts, a shark. And he was expensive. Thorne was a man in his 50s, impeccably dressed, with eyes that seemed to absorb everything and reveal nothing. He did not ask personal questions. He just listened, his hands steepled on his desk. I did not tell him about my father. I did not tell him about the hard drive or the murder. Not yet. I kept my story cold and professional. My husband, Mark Reed, and his business partner, Arthur Vance, are engaged in a systematic land grab in Cedar Springs," I said, my voice as steady as his. "They are using the Riverbend Community Fund as a front to launder money from a shell company, Apex Development, to defraud the city." I pushed the stack of cash across his desk. "This is your retainer. I want you to start with Arthur Vance and 3 members of the Cedar Springs City Council." I gave him the names from my father's ledger. "I want to know every meeting they take, every call they make, and every dollar they move. I want their vulnerabilities." He counted the money, slid it into a drawer, and handed me an encrypted communication device. "You will not call my office. You will use this. I'll have preliminary findings in 72 hours. The meeting was over. I did not return to Cedar Springs. I stayed in Denver, moving to a different cheap motel. From a public library computer, I set up a new, anonymous email address. I copied a select few files from my father's hard drive onto a new, clean USB stick. Not the smoking guns, not the murder allegations, just the breadcrumbs. The initial grant proposals from Apex to Riverbend, the first draft of the rezoning ordinance, which I'd found in Councilman Price's email cache. The documents were not illegal in themselves, but they were deeply, profoundly suspicious. I sent them to an investigative reporter at the Denver Post, a woman named Jessica Riley, who had a reputation for tearing apart corrupt politicians. My message was 5 words. "Something is rotten in Cedar Springs." I needed something to connect Mark not just to the fraud, but to my father. 2 days later, Thorne's encrypted device buzzed. "Vance is moving." "He's nervous. He's been making calls all morning, a total of 12, all to the same burner number." "Mark," I said. "Presumably." Thorne replied, "And Councilman Price is in the wind. Canceled all his public appointments for the day. But there's something else. Your sister, Chloe. She just received a gift from Mark Reed." He sent me a file. It was a sales record. A brand new Mercedes convertible, white, purchased in cash by Mark, registered in Chloe's name. A gift, a bonus for a job well done, or hush money. I sent Thorne a new message. "I need you to put a bug in that car. Audio surveillance is a felony. Ms. Vance." He replied instantly. "So is conspiring to commit murder." I typed back. "I will pay another $10,000. I just need to know if you can do it." There was a long pause. "It will be done tonight. You will get a live feed, but no recordings. That's on you." I sat in my dark Denver motel room, an audio receiver plugged into a small digital voice recorder. The feed was live, for hours. I listened to nothing but Chloe's terrible pop music and her inane phone calls about hair appointments and which bar had the best martinis. Then, I heard a car door open and shut. Mark's voice, smooth and confident, filled the speaker. "Did you get the wire transfer set up?" "Yes," Chloe said. She sounded strained, her voice high and thin. "It's in the Cayman account, just like you said. Mark, I'm worried. Worried about what you have: a new car, a new apartment, and $500,000 you didn't have last year. What is there to worry about?" Chloe almost shrieked. "Alara, it's been over a week. She's just gone. She didn't sign the severance papers. She didn't call a lawyer. What if she's out there, planning something? What if she goes to the police?" The car was quiet for a moment. I could hear the slick sound of the tires on pavement. Then Mark laughed. It was a cold, dismissive sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Planning Alara, Chloe. You are giving her way too much credit. She's an emotional wreck with no money, no job, and no friends. She's probably sleeping in that stupid Subaru of hers, crying her eyes out. She's not planning anything. She's a loose end, that's all." "But what if she is?" Chloe's voice was trembling. "What if she talks about the house, about Beatrice?" Mark's voice was no longer amused. It was a blade. "There is no what if she surfaces, if she makes a single sound. The Alara situation will be handled. It will be handled just like her father was. A tragic accident. Are we clear?" A sharp intake of breath from Chloe. a long, terrible silence. "Yes," she whispered. "Clear." I sat in the darkness, my hand pressed over my mouth to stifle the sound I was making. My other hand, the one on the digital voice recorder, was perfectly, predatorily still. I had it. I had his voice. I had his admission. He had just connected my disappearance to my father's murder, all in one cold, arrogant, and beautifully recorded statement. 3 days after I sent the email, the first tremor hit. Jessica Riley's name was on the front page of the Denver Post's website, above the fold. The headline was cautious, but sharp: local charity, political ambitions, a look inside Cedar Springs Riverbend Fund. The article was a masterpiece of implication. It did not accuse, it just asked questions. It asked why a small-town nonprofit had received millions in anonymous donations from a single Delaware-based entity. It asked why the fund was aggressively acquiring blighted properties, far exceeding its stated preservation budget. It printed Councilman Price's name, noting his consistent, enthusiastic support for the fund's activities and his push for urban renewal. It was just a probing story, but in a town as small and self-regarding as Cedar Springs, it was a bomb. The next day, Riley published a follow-up. This one was about the distressed properties, featuring an interview with the old man whose shop had accidentally burned down. The public pressure was mounting. On my motel room's floor, I had my father's data spread out like a battle map. I was looking at the city council's public calendar on my cheap laptop, and I saw it. The final piece. Next Tuesday, at 10 a.m., was the final city council meeting of the quarter. The agenda was packed, but one item was listed near the end, disguised in bureaucratic language: Ordinance 9B Old Town District Urban Renewal Assessment. This was it. This was the vote. This was the final change in zoning that would turn my father's investigation, Arthur Vance's life's work, and my stolen properties into a billion-dollar development. They had to be terrified that Riley's articles would spook the council members, that their bought and paid for votes would waver. Vance would be desperate. Thorne buzzed me again that night. Vance is on the move. He's driving. He's not going home. I watched the live GPS dot from Thorne's tracker move across the map on my device. It stopped at a public parking garage, downtown. I've got eyes on him. Thorne's message read, "He's on foot, top level, not alone." A minute later, a new file appeared. It was a photograph, taken from a long distance with a telephoto lens. The image was grainy, illuminated only by the sickly orange glow of the garage lights. But it was unmistakable. Arthur Vance, his silver hair looking white under the lights, was handing a sleek aluminum briefcase to Councilman Price. Price was holding it with both hands, his face a mask of fear and greed. "That's the ball game for those two," Thorne messaged. "A confirmed bribe, caught on camera." It was perfect. It would destroy Vance and Price, but it would not touch Mark. I had his voice, but I needed to tie him irrefutably to the financial fraud. I needed the final piece. I needed my sister. I used my burner phone to check Chloe's social media. Her public profiles were a predictable stream of boasts: her new apartment, her new car, and tonight, girls' night, at a high-end cocktail bar called The Alibi. I put on my black sweatshirt and baseball cap. I took a new digital recorder from my bag and slipped it into the pocket of my jeans. The tiny lapel microphone wired up the inside of my shirt. I sat in a dark corner booth at The Alibi for an hour, nursing a single club soda. The place was loud, full of glass and chrome, and smelled of gin and expensive perfume. Finally, I saw her. She was with a group of women I did not recognize, all of them loud, drunk, and flashing new jewelry. Chloe was the loudest of them all, her white Mercedes key fob placed conspicuously on the bar. I waited until she got up to go to the restroom. I intercepted her in the narrow, dimly lit hallway. "Chloe," she froze. She stared at me, her eyes wide, the drunken flush draining from her face. She was not seeing her sister. She was seeing a ghost. My black hair, my pale face, My dark, simple clothes. I was not the Alara she knew. My God, she whispered. Alara, you look terrible. I've been better, I said, my voice flat. What do you want? She hissed, looking back toward the bar. You can't be here. If Mark finds out. I don't care about Mark, I lied. I'm done. I'm broken. Chloe, you won. You and him, you won. She looked at me, her expression shifting from fear to a familiar, cautious pity, the look she always gave me when she thought I was being weak. What do you mean, you're done? I mean, I'm not going to the police. I'm not going to a lawyer. I can't. I let my voice break, just a little. I have nothing. I'm sleeping in my car. They took everything. I just want to disappear. But I need money. Chloe relaxed, a small, superior smirk playing on her lips. So you're here for a handout? No, I said. I'm here for my cut. You and Mark. You've made a lot of money. I know about the house, the land. I know about everything. Chloe, I don't care about it. I don't even care that you were with him. I just want my share so I can leave Colorado and never come back. You owe me that. For my silence. She stared at me, the wheels turning in her drunken, guilty mind. This made sense to her. Greed. Blackmail. This was a language she understood, and she felt guilty. I could see it. She had gotten the car and the money, but she was terrified of the ghost she had helped create. You don't know anything, she scoffed, but her voice was weak. I know about Arthur Vance, I said, playing my card. I know about Apex. I know that my job was a sham. I know you've been partners for years. Her eyes widened. How? It doesn't matter, I said. Look, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to make a deal. Just give me enough to start over. You'll never see me again. I looked down, playing the part of the defeated. Please, Chloe, you're my sister. She softened. The guilt, mixed with the alcohol and her need to feel superior, was a potent combination. Oh, Alara, she sighed, putting a hand on my arm. You're just so naive. You always were. You think this is just about some stupid land? This is bigger than that. What do you mean? I asked, my fingers brushing the recorder in my pocket. It was on. I mean, you think this is Mark's deal. This is my deal, too. I'm a full partner. She was boasting now, her voice rising. I was the one who kept Vance calm. I was the one who managed the offshore accounts. Mark is just the muscle. I'm the brain. Offshore accounts? I asked, feeding her the line. Of course, she slurred, proud of herself. You can't just keep millions of dollars in a local bank, Alara. That's so... you. We've got accounts in the Caymans, in Switzerland. It's all clean. By the time this zoning vote goes through next week, we'll be worth... God, I can't even count it. And you're here begging for scraps. So, Vance and Mark, you're all in it together. Vance is an employee, she said with a dismissive wave. He just does what Mark tells him to. It's Mark and me. It was always just Mark and me. We've been planning this for years, just waiting for that old bitch Beatrice to finally die. The hatred in her voice was so pure it almost made me flinch. I'm glad you're being smart, for once, she said, patting my cheek. You're right. Disappearing is the best thing for you. Give me a number. I'll talk to Mark. 50,000, I whispered. She laughed. Fine. 50,000. A drop in the bucket. Stay hidden. I'll figure out how to get it to you. She turned and sauntered back to her friends, her hips swinging. The conqueror. I walked out of the bar. I did not go back to the motel. I went straight to Thorne's office in Denver. He met me at 2 a.m. I sat in his sterile, dark office, and I placed both digital recorders on his desk. This one, I said, pushing the first one forward, is my husband, Mark Reed. confessing his intent to have me murdered and admitting to his complicity in my father's murder 25 years ago. I pushed the second one forward. This one is my sister, Chloe Hayes, confessing to a multi-million-dollar international money laundering scheme, wire fraud and conspiracy, and confirming Mark Reed and Arthur Vance as her co-conspirators. Thorne did not touch the recorders. He just looked at me, his professional mask gone, replaced by something that looked almost like awe. "I'm done," I said. "Your job is finished." He was silent for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. He did not dial a local number. "I need to make a call. Ms. Vance," he said. "The Cedar Springs police are compromised. They've been on the Apex payroll for years, according to your father's files. This is no longer a local matter." He dialed. "Yes, I need to speak to Assistant Director Jensen at the State Attorney General's office. Tell him Marcus Thorne is calling. Tell him. I'm bringing him the Cedar Springs conspiracy. The whole thing. And tell him I'm bringing him a RICO case, tied up with a bow." The day of the vote was bright and cold. Tuesday, 10 in the morning. I arrived at City Hall an hour early, a person they would never recognize. My hair was still a dark, short bob, hidden under a plain gray baseball cap. I wore the same black sweatshirt, jeans, and sunglasses. I was a ghost, a shadow. I took a seat in the very back row, against the wall, my back to the only exit. I was not trapped. They were. The council chamber was not its usual sleepy self. It was standing room only. The local news crews, drawn by the scent of blood from Jessica Riley's articles in the Denver Post, had their cameras set up in a roped-off area. Riley herself was in the front row, pen poised, and scattered throughout the crowd. I saw them. Men and women in bland suits, their posture too perfect, their eyes missing nothing. They looked like bored staffers, but I knew who they were. They were from the Attorney General's office. They were FBI. The meeting started with agonizing mundanity, a debate over a liquor license, a protracted argument about landscaping at the public library. I watched the clock. My heart was not racing. It was a slow, heavy, metronomic beat. Then, the mayor, a man whose vacation home had been paid for by Apex Development, cleared his throat. "We now move," he said, his voice a little shaky, "to Agenda Item 9B, the ordinance for the Old Town District Urban Renewal Assessment. Mr. Vance, I believe you have a final presentation." Arthur Vance stood. He looked like a corpse. In the week since Riley's articles began, he had visibly aged a decade. His expensive suit hung on his frame. He walked to the podium, his hands trembling as he arranged his papers. He looked out at the packed room, at the cameras, at the hostile, expectant faces. He knew. He had to know. But he was cornered. "Mr. Mayor," he began, his voice a dry rasp. "Members of the council, the Riverbend Community Fund. We are proud to present a plan that represents not just renewal, but the very future of Cedar." He never finished the word. The double doors at the back of the chamber did not burst open. They were opened firmly, quietly. The lead agent, the man Thorne had spoken to, walked in, flanked by 4 others. The men and women I had seen earlier stood up in unison. The chamber fell utterly silent. Every camera swiveled. The lead agent walked calmly down the center aisle, his shoes silent on the carpet. He walked right up to the podium, stood next to Arthur Vance, and leaned into the microphone. "Arthur Vance," he said, his voice booming through the room. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, bribery, and multiple violations of the RICO Act." Vance did not move. He just stared, his face a mask of gray paste. An agent behind him pulled his arms back and secured them with a quiet zip. "Councilman Price," the agent called out, his voice sharp. Price, at the dais, made a small gasping sound. 2 more agents were already on him, pulling him from his chair. "You are under arrest. Councilwoman Albright, Councilman Simmons." It was a death knell. 2 more agents moved, arresting 2 more council members, their faces frozen in disbelief. The room erupted. Reporters were shouting, flashbulbs were popping, a cacophony of justice. As I watched Vance stand there, cuffed, I pictured the other pieces of the machine, all clicking into place at this exact, coordinated moment. I pictured Mark. I saw him in his sleek, minimalist office, probably on the phone with his offshore bank. He would have gotten a news alert on his computer. He would have seen Vance's name. I pictured his face, that handsome, arrogant mask, finally cracking into sheer panic. I saw his fingers flying across his keyboard, trying to initiate the digital shredders, trying to wipe the servers, to sever the links to the Cayman accounts. And I pictured the door of his office splintering open, not a polite knock, but an FBI raid team. I saw him throw his hands in the air, his last desperate attempt at erasure failing as an agent pulled his laptop from his desk and slammed him against the glass wall. I pictured my sister. I saw Chloe in her penthouse, still in a silk robe, a mimosa in her hand. She would be on the phone, probably bragging to a friend about the major investment that was about to close. She would hear the loud, insistent hammering on her door. She would open it, an annoyed complaint on her lips, and find herself facing a federal warrant. I saw her face collapse, the vanity and arrogance melting into the pathetic, childish terror I knew so well. I saw her drop her phone as they read her rights, her new, white Mercedes convertible sitting uselessly in the garage below. I brought my focus back to the chamber. They were leading them out, a parade of shame, the council members, weeping or protesting. And then, Arthur Vance. He was being led down the aisle, his head bowed. As he passed the last row, he looked up, his eyes, desperate and scanning, swept the crowd, and they found me. They locked onto my face. I did not move. I just stood there, in my cap and my dark glasses. His expression was a silent, agonizing sequence. First, confusion. He did not know me. Then, a flicker of recognition as his mind tried to place the face, the shape of the mouth. Ilara then, the final, devastating comprehension. He saw it all, the timing of the articles, the arrival of the FBI, the completeness of his ruin. He realized it was not a reporter. It was not a political rival. It was me, the quiet wife, the boring analyst, the loose end. He stumbled, his face contorting in a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. He knew who had destroyed him. I did not smile. I did not cry. I held his gaze until the agent shoved him forward and out the door. I just watched. It was finished. My father's proof. My grandmother's planning. My rage. It was all done. The entire rotten structure had been brought down. I turned my back on the shouting and the chaos. I pushed open the heavy oak doors and walked out of the darkness of City Hall into the bright, cold, and unknown day. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to connect and share our thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give that hype button a press to help this story be heard by more people.